Who will become unemployed because of artificial intelligence? That's a question that probably everyone who needs to choose a profession is asking today. This week, the governor of California signed an emergency order, but not about war, not about fires, not even about an earthquake. It's about artificial intelligence destroying jobs, and in fact that the government has no idea what to do about it. This is California, Silicon Valley, the very place where this AI was invented. When the creators of the technology themselves have no idea how to act or what to do with what they've invented. This is not journalists panicking, this is a signal. And today I want to discuss this signal with you. No hysteria, honestly, directly. I'll name 7 professions for you that AI will wipe out first. I'll name them directly without beating around the bush, and I'm almost sure that someone close to you works in one of them. Maybe your son, daughter, grandson, niece, or son-in-law. Someone who already made your chest tighten when you heard the words artificial intelligence. And then, because we're not here to scare each other, I'll name 7 more for you. The ones that will survive. The ones that will grow. The ones that will be needed more and more. So the ones you need to point out today, to your grandson, daughter, son-in-law, even your niece. When they ask you at Sunday dinner, Grandma, Grandpa, what should I be? Well, that's it. Stay until the end. Because in the final 5 or 10 minutes, I'll tell you something you won't hear in the news, or at your grandson's school, or even in the synagogue, nor at your daughter's workplace. And I clearly understand that what is happening seems scary. In a way, it really is scary. For 40 years, you've been building your family. For 40 years since you left the Soviet Union or Ukraine or Uzbekistan, usually it was just 2 suitcases. You worked 3 jobs. You pushed your kids to go to college. Suddenly, you paid for your grandson's computer science studies because you were told that education is a safe bet. A diploma can't be taken away. A profession is a safety net, and now a machine comes along and says, no, 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 all right, let's figure this out without panic. Who is actually at risk, and who is really completely safe? The order I mentioned from Governor Newsom, his last name here, this isn't the first signal. Of course, it's just the loudest one so far. In 2025, American companies wrote off 55,000 jobs to AI. I don't know. We don't know for sure if it was really because of AI. No, but at least that's what they said. Here, because of artificial intelligence, 55,000 people were laid off. Just in the first and second months of 2026, another 32,000. Where? In the technology sector. Wall Street announced that 200,000 banking jobs will be cut. In the next 5 years, 39 American companies have already replaced real people with programs, to some extent, in one position or another, but they replaced them. The CEO of Anthropic, which is the company that created one of the leading AIs in the world, by the way, that's actually the one I use, said this publicly. That means artificial intelligence could wipe out up to half of them. He defined this as entry-level office positions, and he thought it could happen in 5 years, or maybe even sooner. He said half of entry-level office jobs. These aren't manual laborers anymore. 64% of Americans in the Stanford survey expect job cuts due to AI in the next 20 years. Well, I think it will happen much faster. The former CEO of Google gave a speech about artificial intelligence to university graduates and was booed. People are afraid, and the fear is kind of justified. But fear is a very bad advisor, especially when you have someone in your family who needs specific advice, not just, it's not all over, it'll all work out, don't worry. Yes, what exactly should you do? So let's go through the professions one by one. The first dying profession is travel agents. Let's start with a profession that's dying right before our eyes, and no one even noticed the funeral. Do you remember, well, Larissa from Brighton, or Marina from Woodland Hills, or Wills, or from West Hollywood? For 25 years, she had a small office between Tatiana and the pharmacy, She sold tours to Moscow, to Tel Aviv, cruises on the Mediterranean Sea. She knew all the Aeroflot flight attendants by name. Families would come to her to choose a hotel for a wedding, for graduation, for an anniversary. She was not just a ticket seller. She was your go-to person, someone who understood Russian clients. Well, I'm sure that it was Larissa and Masha and Natasha who shut down their agencies last year. Not because everyone suddenly got sick, right? Not because everyone suddenly got tired, but people just stopped coming to their office. Well, why bother going? Just stay at home. And they ask. ChatGPT, make me a 10-day itinerary Prague, Budapest, and Vienna in June with kids. Ages 5 and 8. Budget is $4,000 hotel with a pool. In 30 seconds, they get what Larissa used to spend a whole day working on. In the United States, over the past 10 years, the travel industry has lost more than half of its agents. What's left? Either niche specialists in expensive itineraries or those nearing retirement. Those who are now 40, 50, even 60 years old. And those who have lived with this profession for 20 years are retraining. Or they're left without income, if they're lucky and they have some source of income from somewhere. Why is this profession considered a dead end? Because choosing a hotel in a route is a search in a database by parameters. And searching by parameters is something a machine does faster and cheaper, without a lunch break, by the way, and without a cigarette break, which Larissa sometimes used to run out for, and without the need to pay for medical insurance. Do you want to know who's next? The logic is the same. So remember it. We'll see it very, very, very soon. Dying profession number 2. Well, let's combine this as translators and editors, the second blow to those who have worked with words all their lives. Not with creative language, but with functional language. Translators and editors, that's your daughter Lena. She spent 20 years translating contracts for law firms, the kind where the partners are Russian, the clients are Russian, but the courts are American. Prenuptial agreements, property disputes, powers of attorney, insurance cases. 1.5 to 2 cents per word for 40 to 50 pages every day. For the apartment, for the older one's college, for the younger one's camp. Last year, orders started coming in less frequently. This year, well, either they stopped completely or almost stopped. And not because contracts aren't needed anymore, and lawyers just run the document through some kind of AI. They get a translation in 30 seconds and pay Lena to proofread and certify it. Well, maybe $200 instead of $2,000. Lena is barely hanging on. She doesn't know how to tell her husband and her mom. What happened technically? Machine translation has crossed the threshold to be good enough for business. Before, Google Translate used to give funny results. Everyone laughed. Now there's GPT, Claude, and DeepL providing translations that a lawyer is ready to sign off on. It usually works like this with no editing. Review it once, translate it into 50 languages with professional quality. Technical translators have already lost 70% of the market. Literary translators are still holding on, but even there. But only the top 5 masters remain. At the same time, the professions of editor, mass content creator, proofreader, layout designer, and copywriter are dying out. Any job where you need to polish text according to the rules can now be done with the push of a button. I do this every day myself. It's the same logic as with travel agents, only applied to words. 40 years. Your daughter's higher education was wiped out in 2 years. Another dying profession is analysts and researchers. That is what is called a researcher in America, right? So the most sobering thing for parents, by the way, who were proud of their children with a university degree, analysts, researchers, well, not scientists, it's that army of young guys who, after college, go to investment banks, consulting companies, law firms, marketing agencies to gather information. A guy or a girl graduates from Wharton with a $300,000 of debt after 3 years. It's a common story. He got a job as an analyst at an investment bank in Manhattan. The salary is $220,000 plus a bonus, 80 hours a week. You were proud of him. You talked about him at the synagogue, at the store, and at your cousins' weddings, where they of course wanted to talk about their own children. But you were there to hear about your own kids too, right? Here's my son, he's in finance, he's in Manhattan. And what did he do for the first 2 years? He gathered information about companies, he read reports, he compiled spreadsheets, He prepared presentations for senior partners. Because he was smart, he could prepare them. That's the entry-level position of an analyst. In December of 2025, his bank underwent optimization, and he was fired. 40% of entry-level analysts at first, not senior partners, not directors. They fired exactly those who did the work that is now done by machines. Well, let's say your guys, Dima, Vitya, Itzek, haven't been fired yet, but out of his entire class, 30 guys who joined the bank with him, only 11 are left. What happened? And AI learned to do what was left of the job, to read 1,000 pages of financial reports in a minute, to find non-obvious connections, to compare with competitors, to produce a structured document, something a young analyst used to spend a week working 12 hours a day on. Goldman Sachs predicted in its report that 300 million jobs worldwide are at risk of automation in the next 10 years. Just in case. At first we wanted to write 5, but then we wrote 10. Most of them are exactly this group. These are entry-level positions in intellectual work. In the past, excuse me for saying so, it was manual laborers who were replaced, right? Tractors. And now it's happening in knowledge work. And this is what is hard for parents to accept. The profession of a college-educated analyst, the very one they live for so long. The one for which the child studied instead of working. The one for which they postponed their wedding, turned out to be exactly the kind of job that this annoying artificial intelligence takes away first. Because, well, a junior analyst is basically a search engine with a diploma. And a search engine with a diploma costs more than a search engine without a diploma. Okay, another dying profession, graphic designers. Those who chose the creative path. So my niece Anya is in Tel Aviv. She's a freelancer. She makes logos, covers, banners, packaging, illustrations for articles. She studied for 10 years. She started with 50 shekels per job. She worked her way up to Silicon Valley clients who paid $6,000 for corporate branding. Sometimes even $26,000. Last year, those same clients started sending her emails. Anya, we tried Midjourney. It takes just 10 minutes. Sorry, but we're switching. Some clients stayed, for projects where you need exact brand compliance. But the average bill fell by a factor of 4. Anya can't pay for the studio in Florentine. She's considering returning to her mom in Beersheba. What happened technically? Generative AI, this is Midjourney, next is Stable Diffusion, Adobe. Firefly. They learned to create commercial graphics at a professional level, logo, illustration, poster, packaging. Well, a designer used to take a day, 2, 3, now it's done in 10 minutes. Illustrators from publishing houses were especially affected. Designers, advertising graphic artists, photo retouchers, and entry-level packaging designers, creators of so-called stock graphics. Those who are still holding on are art directors. They manage the process. Artists with a unique, recognizable style. Well, the client pays for the name. That's no longer an average designer. That's the top, or management. Graphic design schools around the world are quietly reducing their enrollments. In 4 years, graduates will have nowhere to work. There you go. So, dying profession number 5. Juniors. Again, juniors. You noticed that, right? Accountants. The ones who just finish studying and then go to work. Those very ones. So, well, the foundation, kind of the foundation of the middle class, in the community, in ours and in others, accountants, like son-in-law Misha. Yes, for 15 years he's been keeping books for Russian entrepreneurs on Long Island. Then he started taking on others. Americans started coming to him. A small firm, 6 employees, clients, dentists, young business owners, pizzerias, nail salons, small construction companies, about 70 to 75,000 a year, steady job, 2 kids in school, mortgage. And in January of 2026, a new partner came to the office and said, "We're implementing an artificial intelligence platform. It will do 80% of what you do by hand." 80% of what you do by hand. And next year, we plan to lay off half of our workers. Well, here he is, Misha, but Misha doesn't know yet. Half will be laid off. Is he among the half being laid off or the half who will stay? He's got things to worry about. Now he goes to work with a heavy heart. The routine accounting is gone. Data entry, compiling reports, balancing accounts, preparing standard financial statements. In the U.S., about 130,000 data entry operator positions were eliminated just last year. Accounting assistants are next right now, very soon. So what are we living for? Tax strategy, auditing, working with companies in complex legal situations, advising business owners on structure, the upper level where judgment is needed, responsibility, negotiations with the client, with the government, and the lower level where you need to enter the numbers correctly, that level will not exist. It won't be there. Again, the same pattern. Anything that can be described by an algorithm gets taken over by an algorithm, and now you'll be surprised. Another dying profession is teachers, meaning teachers in public schools, city schools, and so on, as well as online tutors. The sixth one, so to speak, is a painful one. Because, well, when the pandemic started, all these guys happily went on vacation. And then it suddenly turned out that they weren't really needed. A strange thing happened this year. Parents started canceling lessons not because they were dissatisfied. They found an alternative. Their child studies with an AI tutor who is available 24/7, speaks any language, is endlessly patient, and costs $20 a month, not per hour, per month. The child is making progress just as well, often even better. Because the machine doesn't get tired or irritated. It always adjusts to the child's pace and knows exactly where their gaps are. Well, at the very least, tutors have already lost half of their students. And what is happening with schools? A school is a place where an adult explains the same topic to 30 children at the same time. That is becoming outdated right now. Platforms like Khan Academy with an AI tutor or Alpha School in Texas show how a child with a personal AI mentor learns 23 times faster than in a classroom. That doesn't mean that schools will disappear tomorrow. The public system is generally inert. Unions are strong, parents are conservative, you have to go to school. But online tutoring in standard subjects, English, math, physics, is already disappearing. Who will survive in education? Those who are sought out not for information, but for the person. Personal mentors with their own charisma, coaches for unconventional thinking, teachers, individuals whose name alone guarantees quality, not the mass market. Again and again, it's the narrow top tier. An army of teachers, numbering in the tens of millions around the world, is facing the biggest reform since the emergence of the school as an institution. Well, let's put it this way. Let's take another profession that's going to die and is already dying right before our eyes. They're called radiologists, the harshest one on our list, because people chose this profession as the pinnacle. Radiologist. After high school, 5 years of college, 4 years in medical school, another 4 years of residency, 9 years of education, $300,000 to $350,000 in debt. By the age of 40, a permanent position in a big hospital, there in a good city. Yes, $500,000 a year. A mortgage, 2 kids, and a reputation in the community, radiologist, a profession you've told everyone for 30 years is the right choice, not just a doctor, a well-paid doctor, no night shifts, with a predictable schedule. That's important for many people. That's what you saved for. That means that's what many parents in our community have guided their children toward for many years. Since the age of 6, as they say, what will you be? Will you be a lawyer or will you be a doctor? In 2025, a Stanford study came out where AI was making diagnoses from mammograms more accurately than a panel of 5 radiologists. Not just 10% more accurate, not just 20 or 25.
That's
More accurate, period, and 50 times faster. In 2024, the FDA approved more than 250 AI-based medical imaging programs for clinical use, including programs that read X-rays, CT scans, and MRIs autonomously. without mandatory review by a doctor. In new hospitals in the South and Midwest, there are already models where one radiologist consultant manages 3 AI systems instead of a team of 10 to 12 radiologists. There you go. Maybe some girls too. Not everyone has been fired, so to speak, but the hospital has stopped hiring new radiologists. Salaries in the industry have dropped by, I think, 25% over the past 2 years. This year, for the first time in 30 years, the Radiology Institute didn't accept any candidates. I mean, they did accept some people, but people didn't go for it. What happened? And radiology is about recognizing patterns in images, and AI has learned to do this better than humans, period, better and faster. And cheaper too. So who needs a graduate then? That doesn't mean the radiologist will vanish overnight. But the number of positions will decrease 5-fold, maybe even 10-fold in the next decade. Those who are currently in residency will enter the market by the time they finish their training, where their work is no longer needed. And that's why I put this profession in 7th place, because its decline destroys the myth that our community relied on, the myth that being a doctor is secure, a diploma, guarantees. No, it doesn't guarantee. If it's pattern recognition, a machine will take over. Even if your diploma cost more than an apartment in Manhattan, 7 professions, 7 names, 7 faces in your family, and in every other Jewish, Russian, Ukrainian, or Armenian family, whether it's Brooklyn, Haifa, Berlin, Toronto, or Sydney. Today, one of those 7 is sitting at the table, and now the main thing. You didn't sit down and press play for me to end the video on fear and leave you with that weight. I promised you at the beginning to name 7 more professions, the ones that will survive, the ones that will grow. Point out where your grandson, daughter, son-in-law, or niece should go today. Here they are. Well, the same 7, just named differently, the ones that will become more necessary. The first are skilled tradespeople. So, in 2026, an experienced plumber in the U.S. working for himself earns on average about $120,000 a year. In major cities, Los Angeles, New York, Boston, it's $200,000 and above. Without a diploma, without $300,000 in college debt, without working 80 hours a week. In 2030, your grandson Sasha, if he chooses this profession, will earn more than his cousin Danya, who will be a programmer. Everyone praised him for making the right choice. Why? A robot won't come to your house at 3 a.m. to fix a burst pipe. Every house is different. Every situation is unique. Every repair requires a physical presence in an unpredictable environment, which is something a machine can't do. The demand for skilled tradespeople exceeds the supply all over the world. The generation that worked in these professions is retiring. Young people were persuaded to go get an education. As a result, today it's harder to hire a good plumber in many cities than it is to hire a lawyer. I've been through this. This isn't a temporary trend. It's a structural shift for the next 30 years. If you have a grandson or a nephew who doesn't like textbooks but likes to work with his hands, don't scold them. Encourage them. They are among the few in the family whose future won't be affected. Now, the next so-called growing upward profession is caregivers, or what is commonly called home care. It's a profession people in our community are often embarrassed to mention at weddings, but they shouldn't be. Caregivers, nurses, elder care, rehabilitation staff. Let's say, for example, someone has been working for 12 years in a nursing home in Miami, first as a cleaner, then as an assistant, then as a nurse, now as a senior shift worker. $70,000 a year, benefits, insurance, pension plan. He hasn't read Berdyaev, but every day he does what Berdyaev called a personal encounter. Feeds, washes, turns over, talks, holds their hand. Is with a person until the very end of their life. The world is aging. This is the safest profession demographically for the next 40 years. Baby boomers. Generations born after World War II. I belong to them. A lot of people are reaching the age when they need care. In the U.S., every day 60,000 people turn 65. In Europe, in Israel, in Canada, it's exactly the same situation. None of them want to be cared for by a robot. I asked everyone. No one wants that. Everyone wants a real person. They say it would be nice if the person isn't unpleasant. The demand for medical assistants in departments in the U.S. is growing, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, by 35%. That is, by 2032, it will basically double, one of the fastest growing sectors of the economy. And this is a profession you can enter without a degree, without debt, with courses. Well, like 6 months to 2 years. Salaries range from $45,000 to $80,000. Today, they will grow. So Hillel said, "Do not do to others what you do not wish for yourself." This is the whole Torah. The rest is commentary. In this profession, this is the foundation of life, according to Hillel. That's exactly why it will survive when many others die, because in it there is a person who supports another person. Rising number 3. Well, let's say a profession in which our community has traditionally been strong anyway. Hairdressers, cosmetologists, manicurists, massage therapists, body care specialists. Remember the salon on 86th Street. It's been in business for 25 years. She knows all her clients by name, their husbands, their children. She knows which shampoo causes allergies for whom. Women come to her from Staten Island, Long Island, New Jersey because of Sveta, Masha, Marina, Rosa. She doesn't just cut hair. It's part of their week, conversation, and touch. They see me for an hour. A robot won't cut your hair. Well, I mean, maybe it will if you stick your head into it. It won't give you a neck massage after 40 hours at the computer. It won't hold your hand while your nail is being polished. Not because it can't technically do it. It can, but because you won't want it to. Touch, ritual, personal trust. A conversation about what a person seeks specifically from another person. In a world where more of life is virtual, physical touch becomes more valuable, strange as it may sound. Cosmetic specialists, especially those who do injections and work in medical aesthetics, a growing industry with salaries ranging from $60,000 to $200,000 in the U.S. If you have your own business, $500,000 isn't that hard to reach. A licensed massage therapist makes from $50,000 to $100,000 if you work for someone else. Manicure specialists in pricey Manhattan salons, well, around 80 in Manhattan.
80-100.
Professions? I don't know, maybe less. But there are some people, so to speak, who get up to 100. Professions where you can get started after 6 to 12 months of training, without debt. With the opportunity to open your own office, that's a completely different kind of money. In a couple of years, if you're a good specialist. And especially suitable for women, let's say of your daughters' and nieces' generations, those who are looking for flexibility, who don't want to sit in an office. They value direct contact with the client. Now, a suitable profession. This is the most delicate one on our list. Creators, with their own voice. This isn't a designer from the dying list. This is a different category, a level above. Chefs, with an established name. Artists, whose style is recognizable. Directors who have their own style. Writers, whose books are bought because this name is on the cover. Architects, whose projects can't be confused with others, right? There, for example, a friend of mine opened a small Georgian restaurant in Berlin about 10 years ago. Let's call him Leva, 30 years old. So, 30 years, 30 seats. The menu, the dishes his grandmother used to cook in Tbilisi. Every dish, Leva's touch, Leva's story, Leva's signature. People visit not just for Georgian cuisine, but because it's at Leva's place, Leva's. And you can't make khachapuri at Leva's place, not because you can't repeat the recipe, you can, but because people go to Leva for Leva. It's not a paradox. It's the spirit of the times. The more automatically generated content there is around, texts, pictures, music, recipes, the more valuable becomes something that bears the signature of a specific person. The value of the author becomes higher, and that's why people buy not only the product, they buy the author. The generalist graphic designer is dying, as we said, while the artist whose work sells on the strength of the name is growing. The copywriter is disappearing, while the author with a recognizable voice and style, and an audience he has managed to win over with something distinctly his own, is growing and flourishing. Berdyaev wrote in The Philosophy of Inequality, "Society is saved not by the masses, but by individuals. An individual is someone whose name is not confused with others." And this era is an era when mass products lose their value, while something personal, something unique, becomes more valuable. Moreover, it becomes valuable to the highest degree. A son-in-law who writes articles in the general mainstream is at risk, but a son-in-law who has his own voice, a recognizable theme, and a loyal audience is on top. A grandson who draws like everyone else is at risk. A grandson who has his own style, his own series, a recognizable world at a glance, is in high demand. And that's true all over the world. It's not about talent or lack of talent. It's about whether you have your own style and signature or you don't. And today, more than ever, it's important to help a young person in the family find their own voice without copying what everyone else is doing. Okay. Another rising trend, so to speak, right? The professions that are on the endangered list are the same, just one level higher. Senior specialists managing AI, legal strategists, medical consultants, engineer architects, financial advisors, programmer architects. Here's a partner at a small law firm in Chicago. He's been in the profession for 20 years. When a specific legal AI appeared at the firm 2 years ago, most of the partners took a defensive position. This is a threat. We're all going to be replaced. You shouldn't let clients, so to speak, get too close to it, but some people do the opposite. And in 6 months, he masters the tool. And today, he handles as many cases alone as he used to with a team of 4 assistants. The margin on each case has tripled. His salary has doubled. And for the first time in 20 years, he leaves work at 6 p.m. Because AI arrived, and because the others said no, but he said, yes, that's it. A couple of lawyers, a couple of legal, probably, right? On the list of dying professions, and the partner who mastered the tool is at the top. This is the 5th level. The same professions that are on the dying list, but at a higher level, they don't do the work, they make decisions. They give tasks to the machine. They are responsible for the result. Legal strategist, doctor consultant with a patient in a complex situation, engineer architect, a great engineer ideologist,
Сектор большого проекта.
financial advisor with a wealthy client, programmer architect of a complex system. None of them lose their jobs. They get a boost by 10 to 20 times. I can confirm that. If before I used to spend about 45 hours preparing for broadcasts, my research took that long. Yes, I would choose a topic, and then I would research it. Nowadays, after I choose a topic, it takes me an hour and 15 minutes at most. Why? Because I don't search like crazy anymore. I give it a task, and it starts sending me information. I keep asking follow-up questions. It usually takes me about an hour and 15 minutes. Boom. I have all the material ready, and I can write about what I'm talking to you about right now. And what does that mean for your daughter, the radiologist? If she keeps this up, she'll be on the list of dying professions. But if she masters diagnostics as well and becomes a senior consultant, managing the system and making clinical decisions in complex cases, she's on the list of rising professions. These aren't different people, these are different strategies. The choice is up to each person. Now, another specialty that warms my heart, so to speak, that's on the rise, is probably what is replacing this mass teaching profession, which I absolutely can't stand. Right? Psychotherapists. Right. I have one mass psychotherapist here. Well, sit here. Come on, come here, psychotherapist. And don't get in the way of my work. Psychologists, personal coaches, one-on-one mentors, one-on-one. Well, let's use a word that people usually understand differently. A spiritual guide. I don't mean a bishop right now, okay? At 40 or 45, you can retrain. Work as a manager in an insurance company for 20 years. Yes. And then study psychology for 2 years, open a private practice, and even today the schedule is booked 3 months in advance. Why? Because they are needed, because it's one-on-one, because people trust her, because a session costs $200. Why is being a psychotherapist a growing profession? For 2 reasons. The first is the epidemic of loneliness. Young people, raised on smartphones through lockdowns and the rat race, in the gig economy and without colleagues, are looking in droves for someone to talk to, chatting not with a bot but a real person who listens. Also to share their own story, not just hear what others want to say. The second concern is this very AI. The more people feel the looming uncertainty in work, in family, in technology, the more they need someone who can help them process it, help them with this, sort of help them live with it. And it can imitate therapy easily, right? There are some options. I think one is called Wisa, Replica, a few others.
Во...
Voyabot. Something like that, right? Clinical studies consistently show the short-term effect is close to zero. Long-term changes require real therapeutic contact, connection, trust, the feeling that another person sees you, not just an algorithm. That's it. That's it. The demand for licensed psychotherapists in the U.S. exceeds the supply, and it will be even higher, and then even more, waiting lists for 6 months. The salary today ranges from $100,000 to $300,000 depending on the region and specialization. Not long ago, there was much less of all this. And what's important for the audience around 40, this is a profession you can enter as a second career. So, a master's degree in psychology takes how long? 2 or 3 years in different places, right? Getting a license takes another 1 or 2 years. Many of the best therapists started in this profession after 40. I personally know someone who started at 56. Amazing. She's now a little over 90 still going. She says, well, I can't see more than 2 people, well, 3 at most in a day, and she's over 90. And people are lining up to see her because they already have life experience of failures, losses, emigration, parenting, divorces. All of this becomes professional capital. If your daughter feels that her previous profession is dying, maybe this is the best moment in her life to think about retraining while she's still making money there. More. This is a pretty straightforward profession. Surgeons, yes. Dentists. Is a radiologist really dying out? So dentists, specialized surgeons, specialists who work with their hands, those who can touch the body and do something with it. That's it. What you'd call a small dental practice, it will expand. Because people will end up having more money. Yes, insurance starts paying for them, and they want good teeth. Dentists in the U.S. today are one of the most stable professions in medicine, growing demand, especially in cosmetic dentistry and implants. Today, the average salary of a general dentist in general practice, I think, was around $170,000 a year. Yes, specialists make from $250,000 to $500,000, real oral surgeons, periodontists, and so on. Well, surgeons are the same. Orthopedic, neurosurgeons, cardiac, and robotic cardiac surgeons exist. They use robotic assistants. Yes, Da Vinci. A robot, so to speak, for example. But the decision, the hand, the responsibility, it's not with the robot, it's with the person. Physical therapists, manual therapists, rehabilitation specialists, everyone who works directly with the patient's body. This is an important pattern within the same medical profession. Some branches die, others flourish. And to recognize, this is incredibly important. So, if you need to have a radiologist look and determine whether there's some kind of pattern or not, then that's a machine. But the hands and the body remain. The hands and the body remain with the person. If you have a young man thinking about going into medicine, direct him not into radiology, not into pathology by photograph, not into dermatology by image, into surgery, into dentistry, into physiotherapy, into rehabilitation, in those fields with the body, touch, and procedural responsibility. These are the professions of the next 50 years. Well, you see, we've talked about 7 dying and 7 rising professions, and now why is this division not accidental? Why are these 7 dying, and why are these 7 flourishing? Berdyaev, a philosopher whom I often reference, and I believe he is one of the most underrated philosophers. A 20th century thinker wrote in The Philosophy of Inequality, "Society does not survive through the masses. It survives through the individual." My God, how true that is. How true. What can be reproduced loses its value. What carries a unique signature? I hope you understand what I mean when I say a unique signature, right? Uniqueness. And you can see that this is the person who made it, right? Its value increases. And revolution. This is solid confirmation of the Berdyaev cycle, the thesis. After how long? More than 100 years after his death. Everything that was done on a mass scale, translation, accounting, design, education, interpreting scans, it loses its value Because the machine does it much faster, much better. And as we already said without taking a break to smoke, everything that bears a personal imprint, a living touch, an author's voice, a personal decision, trust in a specific person. That's why I want to go to this banker, and I don't want to go to that one. For some reason, I want to go to this doctor, and I don't want to go to that one. Why? I don't know, but I trust him. The value grows. Because the machine doesn't do that, you don't make a choice. There's something you don't like. What is it? Who knows? Somehow he inspires trust in me. A machine doesn't inspire trust. Hillel, whom I also mention very often, the great Talmud teacher who lived 2,000, how many? Over 100 years before Christ. He said, "Don't do to your neighbor what you wouldn't do to yourself." This is the whole Torah. The rest is commentary. All 7 surviving professions are those in which you do for your neighbor what you would like to you yourself would want to receive. You fix his house, take care of his body, cut his hair in old age, and cook his food with love. Do you understand? It's a difficult decision. You listen to his pain, heal him with your hands. This is the business of caring for others. And it's exactly this business that is growing. And your head aches. My teacher, a philosopher in the science of freedom, who discovered that human freedom is first and foremost complete ownership of the results of one's own thinking, taught, a machine will never replace someone who takes responsibility for their own choices. A machine can perform, can respond. It will not take responsibility. In dying professions, the job was to carry out assigned tasks, but in emerging ones, it's to take responsibility for your choices. And that's not a coincidence. It's a rule. And now, the most practical thing. What should you say today to those you care about? Not how you should retrain yourself. That's advice for 30-year-olds. You're 50, 60, 70. You're not worried about yourself. You're worried about your grandson, daughter, son-in-law, nephew. About your son-in-law sometimes, right? Here are 5 conversations you need to have in the coming week. The first conversation is with your grandson who hasn't chosen a major yet. Don't pressure him. Don't say things like, go into law, you should be a doctor, or go into finance. That's an outdated set of rules. Ask him, what do you enjoy doing? Who do you feel comfortable with? What are you good at without being forced? Where do you want to go? Based on his answers, guide him toward one of the 7 up-and-coming fields: surgery, dentistry, physical therapy, craftsmanship, psychology, creative work, restaurant business. The second talk with your daughter, who works in a dying profession. Not all is lost. Don't just say, I'll help you financially. Ask her, what's the next step in your profession? Which of your colleagues is already working with AI and succeeding? What should you learn now to end up on the 5th floor, not on the 1st or 2nd? If she's ready, support her financially, emotionally, and by giving her time to study. The third conversation is with your son-in-law, the programmer you once thought was the most secure. That's an illusion. Junior programmers, and programmers in general, are on the list of dying professions. Senior architects are in rising demand. Ask him, do you write code or do you design systems? Do you solve problems or do you set tasks? If he's on the 1st level, encourage him to move to the 2nd as soon as possible. The 4th conversation with your niece who is searching for herself. Don't pressure her with, finally, make up your mind. Today's economy punishes those who chose too early and hold on for too long. Encourage her to experiment. Encourage her to find her own path. Encourage micro-business. Today, a young person with curiosity, inquisitive tools, and openness has many more paths available than we did, and probably more than at any other time in human history. Well, and 5th, what is called a conversation with yourself. You are 60, 50, 70. I don't know, you are not just a spectator in this story, you are a participant. Not necessarily because you need another job, but because in your life you have your own choice to spend the rest of your days worrying about your children, shaking your head at the news, or to pick up that same tool and find out what it can do. Not to compete with 20-year-olds, although you can compete with them if you want. To better communicate with your grandchildren. To know what they're talking about. I studied a lot just to understand what my eldest grandson is saying. To be in their world, not outside looking in. So that they talk to you, not just give you a quick kiss. Ask yourself, what is one new tool I will try this week? And next week, ask about another one. In 1900 what? In 1900, 40% of Americans worked in agriculture. Today, less than 2%. Where did the rest go? They became doctors, scientists, engineers, pilots, directors, architects, programmers, psychologists, professions that barely existed in 1900. No one suffered from the fact that the tractor replaced the horse. The steam engine made people unemployed, but it freed them from backbreaking labor and gave them time to become someone. Now AI is doing the same thing, only 100 times faster. And for the first time in history, it is freeing people not from physical labor, but from routine intellectual work. This has never happened before, so now a person can finally do what truly makes him human: creativity, caring for others, making decisions, raising children, friendship, and love. The World Economic Forum predicts that by 2030, 92 million jobs will disappear and 170 million new ones will be created. 92 million will disappear, but 170 million new ones will be created. But gentlemen, that's a net gain. 78 million jobs that don't exist yet today. Just like in 1900, no one could name the profession of web designer or data scientist. Today we can't. We don't know. We can't name the professions of 2035. But they are already taking shape, right now within reach, this very second. Newsom, again, our so-called governor, he signed an order because the government is losing control. And it's right. It's losing it, thank God, because control over time, over intelligence, over one's own life is shifting to the people themselves, to those who take the tools into their own hands, not to those who wait for permission and handouts. This is what freedom means according to Golan, boss. Not the absence of obstacles, but the ability to act in accordance with the nature of things faster than those who want to control you. That's the nature of this revolution. A warning. On the side of a thinking person, thinking, that's the key word, an individual, someone who takes responsibility. And on the side of those who are not afraid, well, those who are not afraid, excuse me, to point out to their grandson where the real work is, not where it was yesterday, but where it will be tomorrow. If this conversation has changed the way you think about what's happening, share it with those for whom it matters right now. Your son, daughter, grandson, son-in-law, with that person in your family who, as it seems to you now, is in one of the 7 dying professions. In the description of this video, there is a link to my free book. And if you download it, you will get access right away. As I said, it's all free. The Road to Freedom, our program, our project. This is the complete route that I guide everyone through who wants to live as a free person in the age of artificial intelligence. Until next time.